today is a fascinating topic, and that is the concept of eating on the 9th of Tishrei. We all know that the 10th of Tishrei, Yom Kippur, is a fast day, but the Gemara tells us that somebody who eats on the 9th of Tishrei, it is as if they fasted on the 9th and the 10th of Tishrei. That's why some people have a custom to fast on the 8th of Tishrei. Do you ever heard of this custom?
On the 8th?
On the 8th of Tishrei. Because if you fast on the 8th day of Tishrei, and then you eat on the 9th day, and then you fast on the 10th day, it is as if you fasted for 3 days in a row. Because the 8th you fasted, on the 9th of Tishrei, my eating is like fasting, and then the 10th of Tishrei is Yom Kippur. You follow that?
Yeah, interesting.
I'm not recommending that. So, but it all starts in a Braita in Masechet. Well, this appears both in Masechet Rosh Hashanah and also in Masechet Yoma. Masechet Yoma, the Masechet that talks about Yom Kippur, and the Gemara tells us like this. The Braita quotes Rabbi Chia bar Rav Midifti, and he quotes the pasuk V'initem et nafshotechem b'tisha lachodesh. May Erev ad Erev tishpetu Shabbatchem. So we're told that we should v'initem in nafshotechem is you cause your soul to pain on the afflict your soul. Exactly right on the evening of the 9th of Tishrei. Now v'chi b'tisha mitanin, we fast on the 9th of Tishrei because the Torah tells us that the affliction of the soul starts on the 9th of Tishrei. So the truth, in a different context, we learn other laws from the fact that the Torah tells us that we start the Yom Kippur experience on the 9th of Tishrei. We're not going to look at those other positions now, but what he learns in this Braita over here, what Rabbi Chia learns in our Braita is, V'halo ba'asiri mitanim, Yom Kippur is on the 10th. So why does the Torah tell us that we are involved in this inui, this sort of afflicting our souls on the 9th? Why? Ela lomar lecha, in order to teach you. Kol ha'ochel v'shoteh b'tish'i, anyone who eats and drinks on the 9th of Tishrei, ma'aleh alav ha'katuv ki'ilu hit'aneh tish'i v'asiri. If you eat and drink on the 9th, it is as if you fasted on the 9th and the 10th. My eating of the 9th is parallel to my fasting on the 10th. That's what the Gemara tells us. And we're going to look at really two approaches to understand that. What's my eating on the 9th? There are some that we will see that look at this purely in practical terms, meaning the 9th is the day that I prepare for fasting on the 10th. Just like the day before a fast day, you drink lots of water in order that you'll be ready for the fast day. So my eating of the 9th is connected to the fasting of the 10th because my eating of the 9th is preparing for the 10th. That's one sort of approach that's really linking the 9th and the 10th. And there's a second approach that we're going to look at, that somehow the eating of the 9th is more than just preparing for the fasting of the 10th, but is almost the meal of Yom Kippur, whatever that means. Meaning on Yom Kippur, for technical reasons, we can't eat, but it's still a chag, we don't do melacha. It's not like any of the other fast days, Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is not like Tisha B'Av or like today, Tzom Gedalia. It's not a fast day on which we continue our normal daily activities. It's a day that we're not allowed to melacha. We light candles just like we do on Shabbat and Yom Tov. We add Ya'aleh V'Yavo in the davenings. There's a musaf, obviously. So for technical reasons, I can't eat on the 10th because it's a fast day. But the second approach we'll look at looks at the eating of the 9th as if it is a way of having my celebratory meal of the 10th, but just doing it a day earlier because I can't have it on that day. So we're going to look at those two approaches, and then we're going to take them, I hope, to try to understand them at some level of depth. Okay, so we're going to start with the more practical approach. Rashi on the Gemara, this statement of Rabbi Chia appears in Rosh Hashanah, and it also appears in Masechet Yoma. anyone who eats and drinks on the 9th, it is as if he fasted on the 9th and the 10th. That appears in both places. So Rashi on the Gemara in Yuma says, Hatkenat mecha betishi, prepare yourself on the 9th, kadesha tuchal lihitanot ba'asara. In other words, the Gemara is telling us a tip. It's not that when I eat on the 9th, it is as if I'm fasting on the 10th, but because my eating of the 9th is really in preparation for the 10th, so therefore there's an inui, there's an affliction in my eating of the 9th, because all I'm thinking about is, am I drinking enough, and am I going to be ready for tomorrow? Rashi, on a very practical level, I'll give you an example. I don't know if this is what Rashi means, but this would fit in very nicely with Rashi's interpretation. My father, an incredible person, but that's a discussion for another day. My father drinks coffee. And coffee, as you may know, has caffeine in it. And if I'm used to drinking coffee every single day, so when I have a day without coffee, I get a headache, right? Mm-hmm. So my father on the 9th of Tishrei drinks decaffeinated coffee, so that he is on the 9th, he's drinking, but he's not eating what he would normally eat, because the fast of the 10th has an impact on his eating on the 9th. You follow? And that's what Rashi is saying. Hat kenat mecha. Prepare yourself on the 9th for the fasting that you'll do on the 10th. Is really saying that when I choose what to eat on the 9th, I'm really preparing for Yom Kippur. So there is an inui in that, because I'm preparing on the previous day. You hear that? Exactly, that's Rashi.
Also, like eating specific foods that will help one to store, like maybe water in the body is like.
Yes, exactly. Rice, potatoes, pasta. Yeah, exactly. I'm not going to drink a bottle of wine on Erev on the fast day. No Coke. Exactly. Yeah. So the food that I eat on the 9th is influenced by the 10th.
Is it only a mitzvah like having a special Seudat on Erev Yom Kippur, or is it like everything I eat on the day of Erev Yom Kippur is like considered like a...
Oh, you are such a gift. You are such a gift, David. That is exactly the next question. The question is, so what's the nature of the eating on the 9th? Is the Gemara just giving us practical advice, telling us, prepare on the 9th, because the 10th is not an easy day. Yom Kippur is not an easy day. You have to prepare yourself for Yom Kippur. It's not something that comes easily. Prepare yourself on the 9th. Or is it more than just practical advice, but is there a mitzvah to eat on the 9th of Tishrei? So on this particular point, there's a very, very interesting, I would like a machloket. I suppose it would be a machloket about how to view the eating of the 9th. Is it a mitzvah or is it not a mitzvah? Now, according to Rambam, Maimonides, it is not a mitzvah. How do we know that it's not a mitzvah, according to the Rambam? Because the Rambam in Hilchot Yoma, in the laws of Yom Kippur, where he lists many, all of the laws pertaining to Yom Kippur, he does not include this law in the list. He doesn't say there is a mitzvah to eat on Erev Yom Kippur. Now, the Rambam does mention eating on Erev Yom Kippur, but in a different context. The Rambam, in the laws of Nidarim, of making an oath, the Rambam writes that if somebody makes an oath that they are going to fast on a particular day, right? And then it turns out that the day they said they're going to fast, turns out it is Erev Yom Kippur, then the oath is not valid, because you're not allowed to fast on Erev Yom Kippur. So it's not that there's no mitzvah to eat on Erev Yom Kippur, but you're not allowed to fast on Erev Yom Kippur. And he doesn't mention it in the laws of Yom Kippur. He mentions in the laws of taking an oath. The Rambam tells us that you're not allowed to fast on Erev Yom Kippur. Now that would, I think, according to the Rambam, that would seem to be a good indication that according to the Rambam, there is no mitzvah to eat on Erev Yom Kippur. I'll explain why. Because if the Rambam wanted to say there is a mitzvah to eat on Erev Yom Kippur, he would have written it in the laws of Yom Kippur. But the fact that he mentions the eating on Erev Yom Kippur, but doesn't mention it in the context of Yom Kippur, indicates that I'm not allowed to fast on Erev Yom Kippur, but it's not part of the mitzvot of Yom Kippur. You follow? Following very much like the Rashi, who told us, Hatkenat mecha, prepare yourself on the 9th in order that you'll be able to fast on the 10th. So I don't fast on Erev Yom Kippur because I want to be able to be present on Yom Kippur. And if I fasted on the 9th, I'm not really going to be able to participate in an effective way on the 10th. So it's not a mitzvah, but there's no mitzvah to eat, but there is a requirement not to fast. You follow? That's according to the Rambam, and Rashi seems to follow that position as well. You follow? And that makes sense, right? It's a tip. Don't drink caffeinated coffee on the 9th if that means you're going to get a headache on the 10th. You follow? However, as I mentioned in the introduction, there's a different way to look at Erev Yom Kippur, and that's the Shulchan Aruch. Now, the Shulchan Aruch is very interesting because the Shulchan Aruch, Rav Yosef Karo, normally follows the position of Rambam. And here, he does not follow the position of the Rambam. The Rambam does not mention any mitzvah of eating on Erev Yom Kippur, but the Shulchan Aruch writes like this: Mitzvah le'echol be'erev Yom Kippur u'leharbot b'seuda. There is a mitzvah to eat on Erev Yom Kippur and to increase in the food that you eat. Right? So now, if you put in your head now, you've got like you have to eat on Erev Yom Kippur. According to the Rambam, the reason why we eat on Erev Yom Kippur is so that I'll be able to prepare. But it's not a mitzvah to eat. It's just a requirement not to fast. But now, according to the Shulchan Aruch, it's more there's a mitzvah to eat on Erev Yom Kippur. So now the question, according to the Shulchan Aruch, is why would there be a mitzvah to eat on Erev Yom Kippur? What mitzvah would I be performing through eating on Erev Yom Kippur? And on that, we're going to see two different positions. Is that question clear to you? Any thought? Everything clear until now? Mm-hmm. Any questions? Any ideas on the mitzvah that I might be performing when I eat on Erev Yom Kippur? What mitzvah might it be?
Well, we want to have a certain amount, at least, strength on Yom Kippur to perform the prayer service very good, as good as we can. So if we eat and drink, have a good meal before, to be prepared for the Yom Kippur fast, it makes us give us strength throughout the day to daven with more kavanah, I think, maybe.
Yeah, fair ma'od. Yeah, right. Yeah, it's important to eat because the better I eat, the more likely Yom Kippur is to be successful. Okay. Now, the truth is, in the Shulchan Aruch, often when the Shulchan Aruch, ironically, uses the word mitzvah, it doesn't necessarily mean a mitzvah. Sometimes the word meaning it's an aveira not to do it. Mm-hmm. You follow? Yeah, okay. Sometimes mitzvah in the sort of the terminology of the Shulchan Aruch, when he writes in halacha, if you're obliged to do something, it would write chayav. Yeah. You're required to do something. Mitzvah in the Shulchan Aruch isn't always an obligation. Now here it is, you're not allowed to fast, but it's not. You could have written it with a stronger wording. You could have said chayavim le'echol be'erev Yom Kippur, but the fact that you put mitzvah is a lesser level of commandment. But nevertheless, on that, the Mishnah Brura. Do you remember the Mishnah Brura? This is the Baal Chofetz Chaim about 100 years ago. In his commentary on the Shulchan Aruch, writes something quite hard. He says, "Ratz HaKadosh Baruch Hu litain sachar ba'ad hachila ki'ilu hit'anu she'eino domeh mitzvah sheyesh bo tzar kamo she'amru lefum tzar agra ilu katav b'tisha lechodesh tochlu lo haya lanu schar ela kemekayim mitzvato al yedei achila v'lachen shina katav v'katav mitzvat achila b'lashon ta'anit sheyeh nechshav achila zev lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu ki'ilu haya ta'anit kedei litain schar kemekayim mitzvah b'tzar inui V'yesh la'adam lema'ed b'limudo be'erev yom kedei le'echol v'lishtot. So he writes in the Mishnah Berurah, writes very, very interestingly, he says that the Shulchan Aruch could have written it differently. He could have written on the 9th of the 9th of the month you should eat. But he doesn't write. He writes Mitzvah le'echol be'erev yom ha'kippurim u'la'arbot b'suda, to eat more. Now the Mishnah Berurah, when he talks about eating more, he's saying that my eating on Erev Yom Kippur, this is unusual, my eating on Yom Kippur is like the mitzvah of fasting on the following day. Because normally, eating is quite an enjoyable activity. For those of us who fasted today and eat at the end of the day, I would say you quite look forward, it's the last couple of hours of the fast day, you're looking forward to that, right?
Of course.
So here, when you do it as a mitzvah, I'm not doing it as a tip, but I'm doing it as a mitzvah. So it's amazing because I'm turning something that I need to do into a mitzvah. You follow? It's a bit like on Sukkot, there's a mitzvah to sleep in your sukkah, right?
Oh, yes.
So sleeping is a fun activity. Eating is fun, but we're turning these things that we have to do because our body requires them, requires us to do them, and turning them into a mitzvah. You follow? And through that, I am blessed to have a greater reward for that which I'm doing. It's more than just a tip. He's upgrading it to a mitzvah, explains the Mishnah Berurah, because by upgrading it to a mitzvah, it turns my eating into a loftier activity. Now we're going to understand exactly how that loftier activity works at the end when we read the Shem Yishmael, and we'll spend a few minutes talking about how eating can become a loftier activity at the end. But I'm not just eating because it's a good idea to eat before the fast day, but I'm actually being mekayim a mitzvah. In fact, he writes more than that if I spend time, as we all do, like you, holy people, and you are doing this minute, engaged in Talmud Torah, in Torah study, so that is a very noble activity. The eating on Erev Yom Kippur is so important that I would even shorten my study time in order to eat on Erev Yom Kippur. So I'm turning something which is, like this, whatever, an activity that people do, and turning it into a mitzvah. It's an amazing opportunity, the eating of Erev Yom Kippur, because I'm turning something that I need to do into something that I have to do. And by turning in something that I need to do for my body into something that I have to do as a commandment, I'm turning my, my bodily needs into a mitzvah, which is something you'd very much want to do on Erev Yom Kippur.
So, this is now for Yom Kippur, but is there also like a mitzvah to eat before any fast day before?
No, only Yom Kippur.
Only Yom Kippur. Oh, okay.
Yeah. I think Yom Kippur is a different fast day to all of the other fast days.
Yeah,
All the other fast days, when we fasted today, our fasting of today, and this is very, very important, on Tzom Gedalia, fasting on Tzom Gedalia is an expression of mourning. I'm mourning Churban Beit HaMikdash. All of the other fast days commemorate something to do with the destruction of the temple, and it's a really way of waking myself up in order to do teshuvah, in order to return back to where I need to be. But on Yom Kippur, it is that, obviously, an act of teshuvah, but it is also elevating myself, to some level of somebody who doesn't need to eat. I'm at a spiritual level on Yom Kippur that I don't need to eat because I'm not involved in sort of the world. I'm not involved in this world and matters of this world to the same extent as I am every other day. So it's not a fasting as an expression of breaking from routine and mourning the temple, like today, like Tisha B'Av, Shivasa B'Tammuz, Asara B'Tevet, but really it's fasting as a breaking away from this world and reaching to be closer to a place of spirituality, where my physical needs are less felt. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's on this particular fast day, as explained by the Mishnah Berurah. Really, I suppose in preparing for Yom Kippur, when the ultimate day of judgment. So I'm very keen to turn that which I would do anyway and turn it into a mitzvah. So I have to eat anyway. We all have to eat anyway. But we're turning what we have to do anyway and turning it into a mitzvah. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
That's the Mishnah Berurah. Okay, that's one
So I
position.
don't understand. As the Rav said, we would eat anyway in case.
I know, isn't that amazing?
So, but why just turn it into mitzvah? It's just like, I don't know. It just sounds like we would eat anyway. So why would we just turn it into mitzvah? It's just like because we need the mitzvah to perform, right?
No. He's saying no because I'm not. I suppose. That's a good question. I think that when we eat on Erev Yom Kippur, I'm eating because HaKadosh Baruch Hu told me to eat. Can I give you an awful analogy?
Yeah, sure.
I'll give you an awful analogy. This may not work because it's not formed fully in my head yet. But let's say your father or mother loves classical music, right? Mm-hmm. And they come to Jerusalem for a weekend, and there's an amazing concert at the Jerusalem Theatre. And they want to take you to this concert. They'll enjoy it more because you're there. Now, you may love classical music, but you are fulfilling the mitzvah of Kibbur Davo'im by joining them. You follow? Mm-hmm. It's true that I may be enjoying it, but the reason why I'm doing it is because they wanted me to come with them. You follow?
I see. Okay.
So it's true I would eat anyway on Erev Yom Kippur, but I'm not eating because I'm hungry. I'm eating because HaKadosh Baruch Hu said there's a mitzvah to eat on today. You follow? Okay. Now it's true that I also quench my thirst and I've now eaten. It's true that I might have enjoyed it, but why did I do it? I didn't do it because I'm hungry, say, but I was aware of my requirement to fulfill this mitzvah. You follow? Okay. So there are lots of opportunities where I could enjoy something, but it happens to be a mitzvah. I would hope that for all of us, that there will be many, many opportunities for us. I feel sometimes, I'll give you in a different context, when sometimes I spend time with people who are not Shomrei Shabbat, people don't observe Shabbat. And sometimes we meet on a Thursday, and we say, have a great weekend. And then we meet again on a Sunday. And I feel that my opportunity to celebrate Shabbat, to turn off my phone, to spend time on that which is important, to spend time with people who are important, to daven and to learn and to experience a taste of the world to come. So when I come back on a Sunday, I've really had this deep, meaningful experience. You follow? Yeah. Now, it was a mitzvah. But it was the most rejuvenating and powerful experience. You follow? Yeah. Like a mitzvah doesn't have to be hard, and it doesn't have to be something that I don't enjoy. Now, sometimes my performance of a mitzvah can be such an enriching and really very, very meaningful experience for me. But the reason why I did it is because it's a mitzvah. I keep Shabbat, not because I enjoy it. If I would enjoy doing something else, as opposed to you obviously Shabbat, okay. but it's not impossible for me to enjoy my performance of a mitzvah. I do it because it's Ritzon Hashem, but it's not impossible. So I imagine that's part of what's going on over here. It's a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah. I'm doing it because of this limud over here. Anyone who fasts and eats on the 9th is as if he fasted on the 9th and the 10th. Okay, that's a Mishnah Berurah. That's a positive take on it. The Meiri, I'm afraid to say, has a different take on it. And he says over here, you see, we said the Torah tells us v'initem et nafshotechem, as you translated earlier, we afflict our souls on the evening of nachon b'tisha lechodesh, on the 9th. And we said we don't afflict ourselves on the 9th, we afflict ourselves on the 10th. Nachon Yom Kippur is the 10th, not the 9th. Right? So then, based on that, Rabbi Chia learned, no, because my eating on the 9th is like fasting, right? But the Torah still says that I need to afflict myself on the 9th, not that I need to eat on the 9th. So the Mishnah Berurah's interpretation is beautiful, but it's less fits in less to the verse who says where the Torah tells us that I need to afflict myself on the 9th. We're saying that I'm turning my eating into a mitzvah, but where's the affliction there? So the Meiri explains. Meiri, commentating on the Gemara that we looked at the beginning, the words of Rabbi Chia in Rosh Hashanah, and he writes like this: Ha'il v'shat achila hu mitkaven liyot achilato l'shem inui. Al kiyotze b'zeh l'chol derachecha da'eu afilu l'divrei avera. V'hu omnam gam ken al chol masecha yu l'shem shamayim. What the Meiri is saying is that my eating is l'shem inui. Why? Because I'm eating as part of my afflicting of my soul, and that really, I think, what the Meiri is explaining is more than what we saw in the Rambam earlier, and saying that I have a mitzvah to eat, but it's part of the mitzvah of inui. It's not pleasurable eating. So when I have my decaffeinated coffee or whatever it is that I'm having on my, when I have my meal without any wine, or whatever it is that I'm withholding to prepare for the fast, you follow, whatever food that it is that I eat on the 9th, that I'm eating in awareness that tomorrow is a fast day. So my eating of the 9th is very much informed by the fast on the 10th, right? Meaning it's the fast on the 10th that really dictates what I'm going to eat. So there's an inui in that eating on the 9th, you follow? So I'm afflicting myself in the eating itself, because I'm not having steak and chips, but I'm having chicken and pasta. Yeah.
It's like for example, like a professional sportsman, like a basketball player, whatever. Like he also eats certain food to be energized for the.
Excellent. Excellent.
That. Yeah. Okay. Makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. That's a brilliant example. Exactly. The night before the Olympic, whatever it is, he has a meal that's exactly what he needs to eat. Exactly. So we are eating, but it's part of the inui, meaning every spoon that I take is with an awareness that tomorrow's Yom Kippur. Okay. You follow? Okay. Is that clear? Ezra, Akol Barur? Yeah. So the truth is, everything that we've seen until now is seeing the eating as preparing for Yom Kippur, right?
What type of food you're eating? It could be candy, it could be junk food, it could be healthy, it could be not.
No, always healthy.
Always healthy? So why do people who suck on candy all day long?
Oh, you are we're going to talk about that in 1 minute. You're like planting your questions. That is amazing. That we're going to go to that. Until now, it wouldn't make any sense. Or based on what we've seen so far, why would somebody have a candy in their mouth for the whole of the 9th?
I've heard people do that.
Yeah, I had a teacher in high school. I'm not sure we were ever in school on Erev Yom Kippur. I imagine we were not in school on Erev Yom Kippur, but I remember him telling us. He must have told us that that's what he does.
That's what he does?
Yeah, so we've not found a good reason to do that based on what we've seen so far. We've seen, of course, wonderful educator. We've seen until now, Rambam, that maybe it's just it's a recommendation. Nachon, eat the day before, upgraded to a mitzvah in the Shulchan Aruch. Why is it upgraded into a mitzvah, like the Mishnah Berurah says, to turn my eating into l'shem shamayim, that I'm in shem shamayim mode? It's true I may be eating a delicious meal, but I'm doing it l'shem shamayim in order to prepare for Yom Kippur. Or that's one approach, or that I'm preparing and I'm suffering because my diet today is not my ideal meal. It's the meal that I need to eat today because tomorrow is a fast. And that's like the Meiri. You follow? But according to all of them, It's sort of an awareness of Yom Kippur tomorrow,
Sure.
and therefore I'm eating today in preparation. You follow? So, but there seems to be no reason to dafka eat, meaning to, like to have a sucking candy in my mouth all day. Although I will remind you, Ezra, that we saw in the Mishnah Berurah tells us that if somebody is engaged in Torah study, they would spend less time in Torah study on Erev Yom Kippur in order to invest more time in their eating. And we even saw it in the Shulchan Aruch says like this: Laharbot b'su'udah. That there's this idea of eating more. And the Mishnah Berurah, v'yesh la'adam lema'et b'limudo be'erev Yom Kippur k'tei le'echol v'lishtot, to involve yourself in less Torah learning in order to be able to drink and eat. However, that's one way. There's another way of looking at the eating of Erev Yom Kippur, and that is to look at the eating of Erev Yom Kippur as if it is Seudat Erev Yom Kippur. And this justifies the title of this shiur, Seudat Yom Kippur. Could there be a banquet of Yom Kippur? What's a Seudat Yom Kippur? So to understand the Seudat Yom Kippur, I saw the Ritva. The Ritva on our Gemara in Rosh Hashanah, but the Ritva quotes Rabbeinu Yonah. And Rabbeinu Yonah writes like this: Kedei laharot ki kadosh hayom le'elokenu v'ra'ui le'echol bo mamtakim כמו בראש השנה, אלא שגזירת הכתוב הוא לפרוש בו ביום מתאוות גופניות שנהיה כמלאכים כמו שאמרו במדרש. It says, really, Yom Kippur is Ki Kadosh Hayom La'adonenu. Ki Kadosh Hayom. Today is a holy day that we devote to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. On every other holy day, we commemorate the holy day with a meal. Nachon? Leil Seder, big meal. First night Rosh Hashanah, Sukkot, Shabbat, a Brit Milah, Pidyon Ben. Whenever you have a marriage, a wedding meal, Seudat, Sheva Brachot, we commemorate important events. Whenever you have a day which is Kadosh Hayom Lelokeinu, a holy day, we commemorate it with a meal to celebrate the holiness of that day in a way that we as human beings can. So there's a technical problem. There's a technical problem in Yom Kippur that we can't have a Seudat Yom Kippur on Yom Kippur, because it happens to be a Yom Tzom. You see that?
Wait, it could be after Yom Kippur, no?
Oh, that's a very good question. I'm going to come to that in 1 minute. Ela Gezerat HaKatufu, the Torah tells us you can't eat. So therefore we have the celebratory meal before Yom Kippur in order to celebrate. Now, why don't we have the celebratory meal after Yom Kippur? Why before, not after? That's a very good question. I'm going to answer that question by something I learned as a child. I think it was from my father. I imagine it's from my father. You know that on Ma'ariv on Yom Kippur, so next Tuesday night, which will be Yom Kippur, and then Wednesday morning, which is the day of Yom Kippur, when we say the Shema, we say Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, right? Then afterwards, we normally say Baruch Shem Kvod Malchuto Le'olam V'ed quietly.
Yeah.
On Yom Kippur,
We say it out loud.
excellent, right? So my father asks,
Why? What's the difference?
yeah, because we are like angels on Yom Kippur. We are striving to godliness, right?
And Moshe saw the angels say that.
Exactly.
And added into the Doven.
Very good, thank you, Ezra. So I would have thought that if that were the case, I would say Baruch Shem Kvod Malchuto Le'olam V'ed out loud, not at the beginning of Yom Kippur, but at the end of Yom Kippur. You know, we'd have a Ma'ariv immediately after Yom Kippur. I've spent 25 hours dedicated, we've all spent 25 hours dedicated to Avodat Hashem, contemplating our lives, davening, trying to change evil degrees, bringing goodness into the world, making the world, Be'ezrat Hashem, for the coming year, even better than it is already, right? So this is the time. If I spent a day preparing, I'm mamash hovering like an angel at the end, and yet at the end, I don't. I say it quietly. I've reverted back at the end of Yom Kippur. And at the beginning, when my stomach is full, I'm still burping up the meal that I finished just a few moments earlier. And that at the beginning of Yom Kippur, I'm more like an angel. I would have thought at the end, right? So the answer to that question is the answer to your question as well, of why the meal is before and not after. Because it's all about what you're thinking about. At the beginning of Yom Kippur, I'm thinking about Yom Kippur. My mind is full on the day that I'm about to begin. Unfortunately, I mean, we're human beings, so that's the way we are. Mariv, after Yom Kippur, I'm just thinking about,
Thank God my sins are forgiven.
Yeah, and I wonder what's going to be for supper tonight. That's what I'm on. You follow? I'm far more angelic on the day before. Halavai for all of us, Be'ezrat Hashem, that we will hold on and don't let go. But the human nature is, after Yom Kippur, my mind is not as intense in its awareness of godliness at the end as it, and that's why it's before and not afterwards. It's not a bad thing. We can't live Yom Kippur every day. You know, it's not for no reason that Yom Kippur is one day a year as opposed to every day of the year. Because every other day we're supposed to engage with our Kodesh Baruch Hu in this world as opposed to cut off from this world. So that's why it's before and not after. But in that context, I just want to remind you something, Ezra. This is very important, this. Some people look at the year like this. This is a teacher of mine from high school, Rabbi Rowe, used to teach us this. You go like this. This is like my life. Then Rosh Hashanah, getting better. Then Yom Kippur, even better. And then for some people, it's like that. And then they go back to Sukkot like the rest of their lives. But this is what you need to do. This is it. Are you ready? Life, Rosh Hashanah, Machon Meir. Yom Kippur, Machon Meir. And then you stay there. And then the next year, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Machon Meir. You follow? Just higher and higher. There's no dip.
Maybe we have like could also be like a better how I say I'm missing the word here. Maybe like this. Yom Kippur.
No.
The next Yom Kippur, little dip.
Nice. Yeah, you're far more realistic. Yeah. There's a difference between this and yes, you're right. Nachon. Be'ezrat Hashem on all of us. Next year's Yom Kippur, we should. You're right. You're being too practical here. We're Hasidim here, but we'll Be'ezrat Hashem. We'll all be blessed with a koach to hold on, to keep going, and not to be put off. Okay, so I want to understand very briefly about this Seudat Yom Kippur. We saw the Ritva quotes Rabbeinu Yonah, who talks about Seudat Yom Kippur, the festive meal of Yom Kippur. You know, we wash, we say Hamotzi. This answers your question, Ezra. There is a mitzvah of celebrating. I'm eating on Erev Yom Kippur, celebrating the Kedushat HaYom. Technically, I can't celebrate the festive day of Yom Kippur on Yom Kippur, so that the physical celebration is brought forward by one day. You follow? So I want to understand that. I'm going to look at this. I want to read from the Sfat Emet, and then I want to read from the Shem Yishmol. I'm going to read what they say. I think they're both quite difficult to understand. I'm going to read, and I'm going to share what I understand, and if you have something to add, that will be fantastic. First, the Sfat Emet. He taught this, Tov Reish Mem Aleph. That is to say, where are we now? Mem Nun Samach Ayin Pei. So that's 140 years ago. About 140 years ago, in the city of Gur, this is what he said. And he taught this on the evening of Yom Kippur, Kol Nidre night. He says, quotes the Quran that we looked at, Nachon, do we fast on the 9th? We don't, no. But eating on the 9th is like fasting. Hainyanhu ki Yom Kippurim hu me'en olam haba. Yom Kippur is a day, is a taste of the world to come. Yom Kippur is a taste of the world to come. She'ein bo achila v'shtiya. Just like in the world to come, there's no eating and drinking, so too for us. There's no eating and drinking on Yom Kippur, not as a mourning or anything negative, but just because we are having a taste of the world to come. V'hu be'emet yom simcha ma'od liYisrael. It's actually a day of great celebration. It is a day that we have the opportunity to have a taste of the world to come. Ach, שאין יכולים להתאפק בשמחה זאת קרוי בעודנו בעולם הזה, וצריכים להתאפק בהרות יום הכיפור שלפניו ולאחריו בתוספת מכל על הקודש. ובשמחת התשיעי יכולים להתאפק בהרות יום כיפורים אחר כך. כמו שכתב רבינו יונה, בטעם הסעודה שאין יכולים לשמוח ביום כיפורים מקדימים השמחה. So what he says is, it's a day of great joy. But tachlis, we are physical beings, and therefore it is very difficult for us as physical beings to really immerse ourselves in this spiritual joy. You understand? He calls it lihitabek behe'arat hayom, which means we were unable to cling to the greatness of the day. When I say that Yom Kippur is a taste of the world to come, it's very easy to utter those words. It's much more difficult to wake up on Yom Kippur morning and feel that I'm experiencing a taste of the world to come. So what he explains, what the Baal Sfat Emet explains, is that I have the pleasure of the food that I eat on Erev Yom Kippur, on the 9th, but I bring that pleasure with me into Yom Kippur, and I merge them together. So I'm not engaging exclusively in the pleasures of the world to come, because I can't do that because I'm still in this world. But I'm using it as a trigger. You know what it's a bit like? I'll give you an awful example. You know, if you have a car, I've never ever done this, but you know you have a car that doesn't start on a cold day. So the guy's in the steering wheel and it just it just doesn't start. So you get like a couple of guys to push the car from the back. Push, 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 and then eventually the car can drive by itself. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Does that make sense to you?
I've done that before.
Have you done it? I've never ever actually done that.
I had to do it on my own car.
Well done.
Our own car, because all the cars that I remember ever having were garbage.
Thank you for that,
And
Ezra.
we had to get rid of all of them.
Thank you. Excellent. So not totally dissimilar from that. Do you follow what I'm saying? I'm saying that we're pushing, meaning the pushing is like the eating on Erev Yom Kippur.
Oh, yeah.
You follow? But as I'm giving it the push, the hope is that once I've pushed and then I've started, I can then connect to the holiness of the day of Yom Kippur through the pleasure of the meal that I ate on Erev Yom Kippur. I'm tachlis, a physical being. And as a physical being, it is difficult for me to connect to to a taste of the world to come. And therefore, what I'm doing is my eating on Erev Yom Kippur, the mitzvah that I'm performing in eating this festive meal on Erev Yom Kippur, that pleasure becomes the trigger, the catalyst through which I can then move on to have this taste of the world to come on Yom Kippur itself. You follow? And therefore my eating on Erev Yom Kippur is really part of my Yom Kippur experience. You follow? He's taking the idea that we saw from Rabbeinu Yona, as quoted by the Ritva, who says that it's a holy day. Yom Kippur is a holy day. I can't have this festive meal, but my festive meal on the day before, my festive meal on the 9th is really the festive meal of Yom Kippur. That is Seudat Yom Kippur. Seudat Yom Kippur is the meal that I have on the 9th. You follow? Now the Sfat Emet is taking it further. It's more than just any old Shabbat meal or a Yom Tov meal that I have to celebrate a day, but I'm taking that meal and I'm using that to push start my Yom Kippur experience. You follow? I'm taking that festive meal and using that to connect to the simcha of Yom Kippurim. Simcha of Yom Kippurim. Do you hear that, Ezra? Simcha of Yom Kippur. Thank you. Those are the words of the Baal Sfat Emet. Does that make sense to you? Okay. A very, very similar idea. It really expresses a similar sentiment, but using different words, is about Shemesh Shmuel. Shemesh Shmuel is Rosh Shmuel, born in Zakachov. The Sfat Emet was a contemporary of the Shemesh Shmuel, and they both studied they both drank from the same well. They were both students of the Seer of Lublin, the Chozeh Lublin. So really, it's not surprising that the words of the Baal Sfat Emet and the words of Shem Shmuel will come to a similar idea. But I want to read you from the words of the Shem Shmuel. He quotes again the Ritzvah that we mentioned, the Ritzvah and the Rabbeinu Yonah, that the Seudah, the meal, is the meal of Yom Kippur. I should have been celebrating this meal on Yom Kippur. Laharot ki kadosh hayom la'adonenu. Just like I celebrate Shabbat with the Shabbat meal. I celebrate Yom Tov with the Yom Tov meal. I celebrate Yom Kippur with Seudat Yom Kippur. I just happen to do it on the 9th. You're supposed to eat, enjoyable food. Rosh Hashanah, just like on Rosh Hashanah. You follow? Yom Kippurim hu hapnimiut shel kol hashana. The deepest, holiest day of the year is Yom Kippur. The Arizal taught us, she'az tikun bepnimiut. Every Yom Kippurim tikun hakelim lahapnimiut. Ve'im kein. B'Yom Kippurim omrim Baruch Shem Kod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed B'Yom Kol Ram. We are angels on Yom Kippur, and that's why we say the words Baruch Shem Kod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. As you mentioned a few minutes ago, we say those words out loud. Sheb'chol Hashana omrim oto. We say it quietly. Hainu mishum. Why do we say these words loud on Yom Kippur, but quietly for every other day of the year? Hainu mishum. That somehow even that which is external, that which is physical, becomes spiritual. Erev Yom Kippurim. ונשגב השם לבדו ביום ההוא. מובן גם כן שהסעודה שהייתה ראויה ליום הזה, the meal that I should be eating on Yom Kippur, גם החיצוניות נעשית פנימיות, כי הסעודה צריכה להיות לפי מהות העת. So I celebrate on Yom Kippur. You see, I'm a totally spiritual being on Yom Kippur, and therefore I celebrate Yom Kippur. I don't need a meal to celebrate it. It's not just that the Seudat Yom Kippur is on Erev Yom Kippur, but I'm on a level that in order to appreciate the holiness of the day, I don't need a physical meal in order to appreciate it. You follow? I'll give you a terrible analogy. Well, let's say it's an awful analogy. I apologize. But you're a German speaker. Let's say you go to an opera. I mean, you won't go to an opera, but let's say, I know when I was a little boy, they'd have lots of operas are written in German, right? And so you go to an opera, and then in England, and then they have at the top, I mean, it's a theatre, right? But they often have a screen where they translate the words from the German being sung into English, right? Now, I only need to look at the subtitles if I don't speak German. But if I speak German, I don't need the subtitles. You follow? Because I'm already there. So lahavdil, it's not that I'm not cancelling the holiness of Yom Kippur, but on every other day, the meal is like the subtitles. In order to understand Shabbat, my physical Yisrael, my physical person, who I am, I need a physical meal to celebrate Rosh Hashanah, to celebrate Pesach, to celebrate Sukkot, to celebrate a marriage or a Brit. I need the physical meal is part of my spirit celebration, because we are tachlis, we're human beings in a physical world. So I need a meal, I need a seudah in order to celebrate. But on Yom Kippur, we are pnimiyim, we are on a different wavelength, we're on a different level. And therefore, it's not that there is no Seudat Yom Kippur. It's not even that the Seudat Yom Kippur took place on the 9th. But there's no need for a Seudat on Yom Kippur. Because on Yom Kippur, I reach a level of closeness with HaKadosh Baruch Hu that a meal isn't a necessary medium with which I can experience the holiness of the day. You follow? Every other holy day, the meal is the medium with which I celebrate. So I celebrate Shabbat over a meal and we sing Zmirot afterwards, but it's the meal is a core part of the celebration. But on Yom Kippur, I don't need a Seudah. So my Seudat Yom Kippur Ki'ilu is without a meal. You follow? It's not that I have the meal before, but I don't need it. Do you see? שהסעודה שהייתה ראויה ליום זה, נמי גם החיצוניות נעשית פנימית, כי הסעודה צריכה להיות לפי מהות העת. So, on the meaning, the Seudah reflects where I'm holding at that particular time. So on Erev Yom Kippur, when we are still, we're sort of interacting as we interact every other day of the year, so then I have a Seudah. But then when I transition from Erev Yom Kippur to Yom Kippur, so the Seudah, the expression of internalizing the day, doesn't need a meal as every other holy day. You follow? And therefore, the Seudah of Yom Kippur is a food-free experience. When I say Seudat, I don't mean the Seudat Yom Kippur. I mean like the internalization or my celebration of the day. It doesn't need a meal. You follow? Okay. He says like this, Masha Tatikim Yoshvim Va'atrotem Baroshem V'ne'nim Mizivashchina. The Gemara tells us about the holy people who are sitting, wearing their holy garments, wearing their crowns, and just enjoying being in the divine presence. You follow? That is what I'm celebrating. You follow? That's what I'm celebrating. Just the God, the raised God consciousness. That is Yom Kippur. That is the celebration. However, when I eat on Erev Yom Kippur, my meal of Erev Yom Kippur, like we said earlier, as a mitzvah, is what transitions me. That's how I make the transition from that which is physical to that which is fully spiritual. Now this is, I can read what he says, and I think I need to think about it more to understand exactly what he means. Let me read you the words, and I'll explain how I understand them. Ka'asher ochlin ota be'erev Yom Kippur. When I eat this meal on Erev Yom Kippur, nami hu kahai kavne shenitgale pnimiyut v'shorish hamachal v'chitzoniyut na'asit gamken pnimiyut. That my eating on Erev Yom Kippur as a mitzvah reveals that which is hidden inside me and inside the food, and that allows me to transition from my normal human way of interacting to Yom Kippur, where I'm really experiencing this taste of the world to come. So the meal on Erev Yom Kippur is the transition from my daily existence to Yom Kippur. You follow? It's not that it's the Seudah of Yom Kippur, but it is through that meal that I transition into the day. I celebrate it and I take that physical, a bit like starting the car. You follow? Like it's the pushing in order that afterwards I should be able to go by myself. Does that make sense to you? That's the spiritual experience that I'm doing. Therefore I understand why eating on the 9th is like fasting on the 10th. Because just like on the 10th, it is just experiencing the closeness with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You follow? So the 9th is part of that transition process. My eating on the 9th is really just preparing me to transition into Yom Kippurim. Those are the words of the Shem Yishmuel. So, according to this second interpretation we saw in Rabbeinu Yonah, quoted by the Ritva, the Seudah on Erev Yom Kippur is a critical stepping stone into the Yom Kippur experience. Yom Kippur is a taste of the world to come. And the meal that I eat on Erev Yom Kippur, as I prepare for Yom Kippur, is the transition that I make in order to reach that level of that taste of the world to come. It's either that the meal is the Seudah, like we saw in the Sfat Emet. It is the meal is like the catalyst. I have the meal, and then through that I'm able to go into Yom Kippur. Or like the Shem Yishmuel, that there is a meal, there is like a celebration on Yom Kippur itself, but I don't need a meal for it. I'm on a different level. On every other day of the year, I have the Seudah in order to appreciate the Yom Kadosh. When I have a Yom Kadosh, I appreciate it with a celebratory meal, and then my eating on the 9th allows me to experience the Kedusha of Yom Kippur, but not to experience it as a person, but to experience it almost as an angel, and therefore to experience it without food. That's a Shem Shmuel. Okay, I want to summarize, and then one final comment. We spoke about eating on Erev Yom Kippur. According to the Rambam we saw, and then Rashi also, that it's a necessity. I'm preparing. Like our decaffeinated coffee on the day before, I'm preparing for the fast the following day. Then we saw in the Shulchan Aruch a mitzvah, that it's more than just not fasting on the day before, but it's a mitzvah to eat. Why is it a mitzvah to eat? So we saw in the Mishnah Berurah that I'm turning it into I'm doing it for God's sake. I'm doing it l'shem shamayim. I might also enjoy it, but I'm doing it for God's sake. Like when you go with your parents to this concert, you may enjoy it. I'm doing it out of act of kibbutz avoim, but that doesn't mean that I won't enjoy it. According to the Meir, we saw that it's a mitzvah because I'm eating with an awareness that tomorrow is Yom Kippur, and then we'll eat, with that. So it's really part of my fasting of the 10th is the food that I choose to eat on the 9th. That was sort of one way of looking at it, the mitzvah. But then when we got to the words of the Rabbeinu Yonah and to the Ritva, who sees this more than just as a preparation for the fast day, but it is a celebratory meal. It's not just practically filling up my tank, as it were, lahavdil, in order to get ready for the fast day. It's more than just filling up a tank, but I'm actually having a celebratory meal, like a Shabbat meal, like a Yom Tov meal, like a wedding meal. I'm having a celebratory meal. According to the Sfat Emet, that celebratory meal is a catalyst to push me into Yom Kippur, and according to the Shem Shmuel, it's a transition, that I use that meal to transition into the holiness of Yom Kippur. But in any event, whether we follow the approach of the Rambam, that it is a mitzvah, there's no mitzvah, but I'm just required not to fast, Shulchan Aruch, that is a mitzvah to eat, and then these last sources that we saw, that is really a festive meal, really a Seudat Yom Kippur, like Rabbeinu Yonah, and then subsequent in the Sfat Emet and the Shem Shmuel. According to all of them, we see that Yom Kippur is a day like no other. It's really, it's very easy to say the words. It is a taste of the world to come. It's much, much more difficult to experience that Yom Kippur really is a taste of the world to come. It is a great gift. The more that we prepare, the more that we contemplate, the more that we utilize the days beforehand to prepare, use the meal, the celebratory meal as a preparation, the more we are likely to let the sounds and the smells and the music of the day permeate us, and then really to allow us to experience Yom Kippur as a taste of the world to come, and through that, Be'ezrat Hashem, for ourselves, for our families, and for all of Am Yisrael, it should be a Gemar Chatima Tova, the beginning of a year, the year of the Geula, a personal Geula for each of us individually, but also a Geula for all of our holy nation. Yishar Koach to all of